Summer in the City is a festival to support Voices of Our City Choir and its work with San Diego's homeless and unsheltered residents. The festival will feature popular San Diego bands and entertainers, including the Voices of Our City Choir. With food and drinks available on site, there will be something for everyone. The festival is Sunday, August 18th from 4 to 9 p.m. in downtown San Diego. Visit voicesofourcity.org for details.
Thanks for joining us on the Voice of San Diego podcast in partnership with News Radio 600 Cocoa. I am Scott Lewis, editor-in-chief at Voice. I'm joined as always by assistant editor Andrew Keats. Hello.
What's up, buddy?
How are you? And managing editor Sarah Libby.
Hello.
Hello. Sarah, so sorry, but I know you missed the great Voice of San Diego Day at Petco Park yesterday, Padres Day.
It was a very mom moment.
A mom moment. The daycare sends an alarm, as they do.
Yeah. And
then you got to go take care of it no matter what you might have going that day, even if it's the best Padres Day of the year.
That's right. I didn't eat a Hodet's burger, and I was very sad.
There's a lot of people who did. Sorry.
Great, thanks.
So what else did she miss, Scott?
She missed the Padres win. It was a little hot, but we got in the shade. We got some big glasses of, I ate some soft serve chocolate ice cream. It was really good.
Happy for you guys.
Hot dog.
Yeah. It's a good day at the ballpark. All right, so just thanks to Voice of San Diego supporter Jason Everett, who made that possible. You might know Jason. He used to be involved around town locally. He's now a big shot at LinkedIn in New York. So thanks, Jason, making that possible. The Voice of San Diego crew had a good time. All right, coming up on the show today, an incident at the Central Library highlighted its place on the front lines of the county's mental health crisis. We're going to talk to Voice of San Diego reporter Lisa Halverstadt about that. The Otay Mesa detention center is facing criticism over medical care for asylum seekers. And finally, Mayor Kevin Faulkner is facing a big decision. We talk about that before our interview this week. That guest is the director of public affairs at the San Diego Chamber of Commerce, Stefanie Benvenuto. But first, there is drama. There is always something in Sacramento heating up around this time of year. Sarah, help me place the timeline. The end of the session is October, something like that?
So I think it's a little before that because the governor has till mid-October, I think, to sign or veto everything.
All right. So there was a lot of buzz this week about comments that State Senate President Tony Atkins, San Diego's own, made to Capital Public Radio about AB 5. This has to be the biggest thing in Sacramento right now, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, SB 50 is done for the year.
Mm-hmm.
Shirley Weber's police shooting bill sitting on the governor's desk. So this is like the really premier bill there is left to decide. Apparently
there were a bunch of semi-trucks circling the Capitol this week, honking.
That's good competition for like the kid props for the vaccine bill. There's a lot of good, interesting props.
A lot of noise around that campus. So AB 5, of course, would codify that new legal ruling about Dynamex.
Hold on?
Yeah.
What did the truckers want?
They want not AB 5.
Okay.
They were not
Or they
happy.
Want to be carved out of AB 5.
Yeah, they want to be independent contractors still.
Okay.
So this ruling, Dynamex and AB 5, would codify into law that you basically can't be an independent contractor unless you satisfy three big qualifications, this ABC test. And the big one in that one is the B, which is that if you are serving the purpose, the usual course of business of an operation, you can't be an independent contractor. You have to be an employee.
So if you're a restaurant, you could independent contract your accounting.
Right.
Because
your air conditioning.
Your air conditioning, but not your food service.
Right.
But if you were, say, a company that provides rides to people and you were a driver of those rides, that probably might run into some problems.
And bingo.
That's
hypothetically.
Purely hypothetically.
That seems to be the target of this bill. But there's a lot of industries upset. There was architects that were carved out. There was like lawyers that were carved out. Hairstylists.
Yeah.
Journalists got a little bit of a carve out. But a lot of people did not get it. And so this gig workers, the Postmates, the Door Dashers, the Ubers, Uber Eats, all these things, they did not get a carve out. And so the bill could have major consequences for those type of companies. It's assumed the bill would pass, but then Atkins said this to Capital Public Radio.
I have no doubt that we'll discuss this into next year. I think there's been a lot of work by a lot of stakeholders, whether we're talking the chamber, the business communities, the Chamber of Commerce, labor, in terms of trying to clarify where those lines are. And I think at some point we move forward and we take action on this piece of legislation. And there's no doubt in my mind that we probably have more work to do going into next year as we continue to have conversations throughout the state for various professions. I mean, I don't think many of us understood.
Okay, so a lot of people saw this and said, this legislation will pass at some point?
There's some pretty definitive terms in there. I have no doubt that we will discuss this into next year. That doesn't leave a great deal of wiggle room.
And we have more work to do going into next year.
Yeah, and then, like a good high school essay, concluding sentence of the paragraph echoes the introductory sentence, and there's no doubt in my mind that we probably have more work to do going into next year.
So was she saying that this would stretch over the New Year's? The guy who did the interview, Ben Adler, clarified later, no, it's going to pass, but he thinks that maybe negotiations for some sort of new carve-out may continue after that.
Yeah, I mean, like with many statements that Toni Atkins makes, it's hard to tell a little bit exactly what she meant. There have been a lot of really high-profile measures that she did turn into two-year bills in order to get some kind of consensus. We saw SB 50 get shelved for the year. And then, again, the police shooting bill that did pass this year was introduced last year. And we sort of were surprised back then that it got put on this 2-year track. So she didn't say definitively that's what's happening. And I think Lorena Gonzalez would probably be surprised to know that was happening or take issue with that happening. But she certainly opened the door to it.
Yeah, okay. And we have clarification. The end of the session is September 13th. So yeah, they have a couple weeks to work this out. A lot of things could fall into place, but that is the big drama moving forward. Have major impacts on all kinds of businesses, on all kinds of journalistic entities, on all kinds of all these other entities. Elizabeth Warren, along with Pete Buttigieg, and who else came out in favor of AB 5?
Yeah, so Elizabeth Warren this week wrote an op-ed for the Sacramento Bee in which she essentially endorsed AB 5. Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg have both proposed kind of taking AB 5 to the national level. So Pete Buttigieg said, this is my kind of vision for how labor laws should work, and kind of wrote it into his platform. And he even specifically mentioned that ABC test. So it was very clearly modeled on California's rules and on AB 5 specifically. And then Bernie Sanders has said we need national legislation to codify this at the national level.
Hard to picture a potentially more transformative law on employment law. So we will see if that has the impact it could. Two weeks ago, a man died by suicide at the downtown Central Library. 3 other people have attempted suicide there since May. As Voice reporter Lisa Halverstadt has written, these incidents highlight how East Village and Central Library in particular are at the center of the mental health and homelessness crisis in the region. She's spent the last few months really looking into the mental health crisis around San Diego, and everything from ERs to various levels of beds and other areas where people can get the care they need. We have here to talk about this issue. Lisa, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So what should we say about what happened at the library? How did you hear about it?
I started to hear about it because I've been working on these stories about the mental health system and had just been told that librarians were really distraught about what had occurred, and also that homeless people who often go to the library had also witnessed this incident and were really upset about it. And so I started digging into what had occurred. I don't really want to get into the specific details, so I don't necessarily think that's needed.
Well, let's just say that it was violent, it was public,
Yes.
and it led to a lot of the staffers there having to take some time, and they brought in other reinforcements for them and stuff like that. And we don't usually highlight these specific incidents or things, but this was one that told a broader story about how the library really is at the front lines of this mental health crisis where it is in East Village.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. I mean, the library is in the epicenter of homelessness and mental health issues in our county. And as a result, librarians are really thrust into this situation of having to deal with a lot of people who are in some level of crisis, or, there are also just many homeless individuals that literally go to the library every day to just charge their phones and check out books like others. But this situation and others that have come up, even over the past few years, have inspired the library and other folks in town to really talk about what are other resources that could be offered at the library. So they've had a mental health fair. They've had more outreach workers that are actually seeking out homeless individuals and people who appear like they may have a serious mental illness to try to connect them with help. And also because of, certainly some concerns about security at the library as well, the city recently approved a new contract that provides stepped up security in the area. And I even, when I was at the library reporting on this story, witnessed an incident where the security guards pretty quickly responded to somebody that was really kind of struggling in a moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, this fit into this broader narrative, obviously, of things that you're looking into with the region. One of the stories you did was just how backed up emergency rooms had gotten, that that this is the only place to take someone. Often police are forced to take somebody to the emergency room, and they can sit there for hours, if not days, waiting for a longer term assistance. What's going on there?
So what I found looking at state hospital data was that there has been a 60% spike in the last 10 years of people with a mental health issue coming into the ER. And one thing that it's really important to note about this is that a lot of these situations can actually really inflame the condition of the person coming in. They're in crisis, they're traumatized, and then they may be strapped to a gurney or be waiting for a long time to get to that hospital bed that's a much more appropriate level of care for them. So I talked to a number of folks about their experiences in the ERs, and they just described some very traumatic situations. One thing that I guess I would also say is that people are it's not just an issue of coming into the ER. It's, as you said, Scott, coming into the ER and then having to wait for something else. And, more broadly, I think what I'm finding is that this system is just clogged. There are a lot of people coming in and then waiting a very long time for the thing that's most appropriate for them. So in the ERs, that can be a number of days. Once they get into the hospital, that can be much longer.
So the idea is that the ER is not only not the best place for somebody to enter into the system, but the places that they would otherwise be directed to go are not essentially open. They don't have openings for people.
Well, the way that our system has kind of been set up, or where people are directed, is if we think about it, we have any kind of health condition, we go to the emergency room. And so the emergency rooms have been the place to go. There are some increasing conversations in the county about creating other sorts of facilities that people in crisis could go to avoid having to walk into an ER that, just by its nature is a pretty busy place.
Mm-hmm. So there's been a lot of talk about the mental health crisis, and I applaud you for digging into something so complex and fraught. But is there anything happening? Is there a plan coming together? Is there money coming together to provide more of these facilities that are needed?
So right now, I would say that San Diego County leaders are really confronting this mental health crisis more than I've seen in my time in San Diego. There are a number of conversations. County leaders have rushed to try to put together deals to supply more of these long-term beds. But one thing that they're quick to say, whether I'm talking to county supervisors or the head of behavioral health for the county, is that they have a lot of work to do to look at this whole system. It's not just a matter of adding more beds in one particular area. It's about looking at the system, looking at how can we make it so that somebody doesn't have to get to that crisis point in the first place, that it's easier for them to just get an appointment, for example, with a psychiatrist before everything goes bad. And then once somebody is in that crisis, how can we more quickly treat them in the service that is best suited for them and track them through the system? That's also something I'm learning that, is really an area where a lot of work is needed.
Mm-hmm. Well, Lisa Hallerstadt, you dug into something obviously troubling in many ways and complex in many more ways. Thank you for doing that, and appreciate your reporting.
If you do know somebody that is in crisis, or you think may be considering suicide, or you just want information about how you can help others, you can call the San Diego County Access and Crisis Line. That's 888-724-7240. And you can also look online. There's a great deal of information on the county's website as well.
Cool. Thank you very much. The Otay Mesa Detention Center has faced criticism for a long time on its medical care, and new records show the extent to what asylum seekers have endured there. Voice of San Diego reporter Maya Srikrishnan got a lot of these records and found many detainees have alleged that serious medical conditions are not being adequately treated at the center. They also allege that some conditions are just ignored. So what did she find?
So she actually found two separate but related things that are both pretty disturbing. One is just this idea that detainees in the center say their medical conditions are not being cared for properly, and some are really serious things. So several HIV patients said they were at the center for weeks before they started receiving medication, and that they were there during horrific mumps outbreaks where they're particularly vulnerable. And then there were also conditions where, to be honest with you, my reaction was that they were straight out of a horror movie. One man was sporadically bleeding from his eyes and ears. One man alleged that his colostomy bag was being changed so infrequently that it was essentially overflowing, and acid was burning his skin and excrement was leaking out of the bag. So just really, really horrific things that they say aren't being treated adequately. And then the other thing that she found was that many of these detainees are requesting parole so that they'd like to be let out and have these conditions treated in a different type of facility, and that it's being granted hardly ever or really sporadically. And several immigration attorneys she talked to said it kind of goes in phases, and it's really just at the whims of ICE as to whether they grant, these paroles for people who have really serious conditions or are very frail and are kind of deteriorating in detention.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of these folks, if not most, are not accused criminals. They're not convicted criminals.
Right.
They're often just being detained because we've decided that detaining them, or at least the administration has decided that detaining them, keeping them somewhere, is better than the old system of letting them come back for their hearings. Yeah.
So, for example, the man who's bleeding from his eyes and ears, he'd suffered a gunshot wound before he was in detention, and he asked for asylum legally at a port of entry. He didn't enter the country illegally. He has no criminal convictions that he's being, he
asked for asylum because he got shot.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so check that out at voicesandiego.org. Maya's obviously had story after story about some of these things worth reading. So Mayor Kevin Faulkner has a few weeks to make a big decision. The city council increased the fee that builders must pay if they do not set aside 10% of units for people making 50% or less of an area's median income. It's about as simple as I can put that. basically they have to pay a fee for not including affordable housing in their buildings.
That's going to have to suffice if it's not specific enough for you. Save your emails.
Yes,
That's going to have to work.
Well, bring them. I'll take them. That's fine. But Democrats did not get 6 votes for the new fee, so the mayor could veto it. He has tremendous amount of leverage. His allies would probably like him to, but Council President Georgette Gomez would not like that, and she threatened to unravel the bipartisan alliance that the mayor worked so hard to put together for his beloved and needed desired expansion of the convention center, the hotel room tax increase. Remember, this is from the mayor's State of the City speech. We don't want to build up drama. This is how big of a deal he says it is.
So as is the State of the City tradition, I'm going to talk about the convention center for a moment. I'm excited that the initiative to provide billions to reduce homelessness, as well as repair our roads and modernize and expand the San Diego Convention Center, is finally, without question, headed to a public vote. It's been a marathon, not a sprint, ladies and gentlemen. The coalition of supporters, though, continues to expand. Homeless advocates, public safety, Democrats, Republicans, business groups, labor groups, they're all on board because they agree how important this is for San Diego. The homeless crisis makes the need for a vote more urgent than ever. Without this funding,
they are all on board, but that's what she was threatening to take apart. So he has a big decision to make. What do you think he'll do? I don't know. I think he'll probably not do anything to threaten the convention center, or maybe they'll figure out a middle ground. I don't know.
It's very hard to say because it's not exactly clear what lever Council President Gomez is threatening to pull on the convention center. There's a clear threat in what she's saying, but does she mean that she would use the votes that she has on the city council to delay the convention center until November?
I think
does she mean she would in some way pull support from the attendant progressive groups that are in the convention center coalition? Because if that's it, look, Georgette Gomez is perhaps the most powerful person in the city besides the mayor, but I don't actually know that she can do that.
Well, that'd be the question, right?
Right,
The only thing she can legitimately threaten is actually maybe getting the labor groups that have decided to join with this tax increase initiative to pull out of that coalition and not support it.
Which I think would be a very big ask from her. I mean, I think the San Diego Imperial County's Labor Council and Keith Maddox as director they're not being dragged along with the convention center.
No, they're
in. So, like, does she have the ability to just pull every person that's from left of center and say, like, I'm walking and I'm taking my friends with me?
Well, maybe not, except for
I'm not saying that she doesn't necessarily. It's just not exactly clear to me what is being threatened.
I've never really felt like the coalition was like all that like strong, that they were all like blood brothers. Like it felt pretty tenuous for 3 years now or whatever.
It has, because they're not necessarily used to working together.
Yeah.
And it may just be Council President Gomez saying, look, we all know that these things can't survive with organized opposition, and so any group of people that I can rally to some sort of opposition group is going to be a big problem for you.
Right.
I guess I just would like a little bit more clarity about exactly what she's saying.
This is only tangentially related, but going back to Kevin Faulkner's speech, if we ever make a theme song or like a supercut for the San Diego special, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and in true San Diego fashion, those are going in.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Notice it got applause too.
Yeah.
Yay! Marathon.
Yeah, we take forever to do things. He's right.
On the other side of the break, Andy and I sit down with Stefanie Benvenuto. She's from the Chamber of Commerce Public Affairs Director there. And we are going to get into the weeds on housing development, all these fees, regulations, and the mayor's big decision. Is she pressuring the mayor? Is her and her coalition? We heard from Georgette Gomez a couple of weeks ago. This is the other take on that issue. Stay with us.
Do you want to hear your name or company promoted on the Great Voice of San Diego podcast? Naming opportunities are available. Voice of San Diego's audience is informed, educated, and engaged. You can reach thousands of listeners every week through this show. Contact Iris Magid for details. You can reach out at iris@voiceofsandiego.org. That's IRIS at voiceofsandiego.org.
We are back. This week, Andy and I sat down with Stefanie Benvenuto. She is the Director of Public Affairs at the Chamber of Commerce. She's also a member of the San Diego Housing Commission. First off, what is the Housing Commission? Because nobody knows.
Seriously?
I mean, we do.
Yeah, I guess. So the Housing Commission is the authority that oversees the affordable housing in the city of San Diego, including, so it's not just the housing, but it's also the voucher program, the Section 8 program, which comes down from Housing and Urban Development at the federal level. We are also the organization that provides the gap financing and handles the tax credit and bonds that pay for affordable housing being developed. And we're a little bit special because we also have a nonprofit development arm of the Housing Commission where we do actually do affordable development deals.
All right, I'm going to translate that real quick. So, A, if the city of San Diego owns or manages housing, the Housing Commission is in charge of that.
Mm-hmm.
B, if we get funds to give to people so that they can subsidize their rent, the Housing Commission manages that.
Mm-hmm.
And C, if we have money set aside that we want to invest in affordable housing projects, the Housing Commission does that.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for coming in on this, all this stuff. So we had Georgette Gomez, the city council president, come in. She talked about the most recent, probably the biggest thing that the Democratic majority has done on the city council since she took over, which was this new fee regimen for affordable housing requirements on new construction of housing. If you build housing in the city of San Diego, you're required to build 10% set aside for low-income families. She wanted to make that even lower-income families and make the fee that you have to pay if you don't do that a higher fee. And you were part of a group that said, like, hey, we need to watch how far we push that because it may actually have more negative consequences. We may create fewer affordable units even though there's more money required. Is that the way you've left the debate, that that's the situation we're in right now, that we may have actually hurt the construction of affordable housing?
So I just want to be really clear at the start of this that there is still, I am confident, room to negotiate. I don't think the conversation's over. I certainly hope it's not over. And the coalition that I'm a part of is absolutely committed to continuing to kind of tweak some of this because we are not far away from the council president on where we want to land. I think, we're now kind of just negotiating in smaller bits, and that's positive. But the frustration I think that our coalition has expressed with the proposal is that no one's overwhelmed with the housing production right now in the city of San Diego. So safe to say we have to be very careful about any further policies or proposals that could otherwise hamper development, right? We're like borderline record low permits being pulled to be built. So we're sensitive to anything that could slow that down. Fundamentally, making anything more expensive means it's going to be slightly harder to get it, right? This proposal, you just said, it raises the fee. Okay. How much is going to be a very big deal. It also lowers that affordability when you do build on site, meaning that it will cost more on the developer side to recoup all of that and balance that out. So we believe that this proposal really in any form probably will slow down housing production, but we're absolutely at the table trying to find out where we can strike a balance.
And when she was here, she said specifically that you changed the goals, that she negotiated with you guys for a long time, and then right as it's coming up, you moved what you were hoping to get, and she said, "Look, that's enough. I'm done with that." Do you guys have a response for that?
It has been a long time. It has been. We started. I think it was like over a year ago. We all sat down in that room and kind of, shared our feelings.
What room does something like this happen, by the way?
It happened at the Housing Commission. There was like 35 people around this table. I'll be totally honest. Like the early meetings, I think were a lot of philosophical sort of, this is where I am, that's where you are. And it was hard. It was hard to get people really rolling. But I think everyone did go in good faith. And so the proposal came out. We were always, I would say, pretty clear, really transparent about what we needed to see to come off opposition on this proposal. And so we put out a letter. I think y'all were kind enough to publish it that had 8 items that we wanted to see. All 8 were important, but in the spirit of compromise, we said, okay, these top 4 are really important. These top 4 are like make or break. We'll let go of the other stuff because we get the political realities of what's happening. The council president did come along and compromise on the vesting and the phase-in, which are basic, like it was like good governance sort of.
It was less like the principles of the issue and more like how they're implemented.
The vehicle that's right. And so,
in other words, what you're saying is like if there's a project underway right now, you guys were worried that it would suddenly have new requirements put on it. And she said, okay, look, fine, we'll phase it in over time.
And she was always pretty clear, like in the early meetings, she always said, like, I don't. And to her credit, she was clear. I don't want to hurt existing projects. I don't want to pull the rug out from anybody. Like, so that was some like legalese, technical stuff that we worked on, and everyone, okay, cool. Phase-in was important because it takes a while for land values to readjust after you change what you're going to build on it. So that left us with the not insignificant factors of the fee and then the on-site requirement. So the fee, we came alongside the Housing Federation who said, listen, we think a range of 18 to 22 is probably better. So the proposal right now is at 22. And we said, we think 18 is maybe better. And remember, that's a new floor. So it's not like, all right, 18, we're all done, everyone go home, it's going to be 18 forever. It's 18 and it re-indexes. So now there's an admittedly, and I'm sure someone's going to get mad at me for saying this, funky formula for how we determine the in-lieu fee. It's a little weird. And it is kind of confusing and it's a little less predictable. So we're going to index it now to construction industry in LA. That fee will never go down again. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. And we're not putting up a fight on that.
And so just to be clear, we're talking about $18 per square foot. Mm-hmm. So if you build 100,000 square feet, you're building 18,000, or you have to pay $18,000 to this fund.
Yes. And remember, there's an existing fee. The fee right now is $12.73. 4 weeks ago, it was $10.84 or something like that. It's going up. And to say from, $10 to $22 is insignificant, I think kind of disregards the fact that the market's struggling now. Like the market's telling us that something's keeping you from building, right? I don't know that increasing the cost is the right way to change course. Nonetheless, we feel comfortable saying that $18 is maybe where we would want to land. And then the on-site requirement, we're asking that it go 10% on-site at 60% AMI. Right now it is 65, current code 65. The council president's asking for 10% at 50. And she has expressed that there has been some frustration. Perhaps there was some miscommunication somewhere in there, but I think we've been really clear. And I am still really hopeful that there's nothing new under the sun in the housing game. There's not a lot of wiggle room here. We're not bluffing about any of this.
I want to turn this over to Andy, my friend Andy Keats here, who has some expertise in this area. But I do want to clarify what you just said. So, and this is fascinating how tense this is. But what you're saying is that right now it's 10% at 65% of area median income. So they look at the incomes of the area. They say this is the 65% mark, and that's what you have to reserve these affordable units for, that group. And she wants to move it all the way down to 50%. You guys are comfortable with 60%.
Yes. Okay. And we say 60 because most tax credit programs, these come down from the feds and the state, these tax credits, and they're like the post-redevelopment tax credits is where the game is on getting affordable stuff built, right? Those programs are mostly designed around 60% AMI too. So it's, my natural reaction is why be offline if that's where all these other programs exist?
So right now, the gap to put, there's a few different items on the table, but to look at one specifically, the dollars per square foot, right? So you guys, your request is at $18. That's basically your ask. And what the city council approved was at $22, right? What is interesting to me is that it's hard for me to believe, and this is in both directions, that somewhere between 18 to 22 lies a magical point at which private development projects break. It is likewise hard for me to believe that somewhere between 18 to 22 you reach a threshold at which you unleash a magical, unending flow of new affordable housing projects. It seems like in either direction, we're dealing at the margins. That being the case, like, how can these negotiations have grown so intractable?
Well, I may be Pollyanna-ish, but I don't think they're intractable.
Okay.
I mean, I think in the middle of a housing crisis, housing makes people nervous, right? Like no one's going to just, okay, great, good idea, let's move on. Everything's going to get the extra attention. And so this is getting extra attention, and rightfully so. I think that's okay. It's important that the whole city, we have to find a balance so that the whole city is able to continue to move forward in housing. And that's kind of why we are so passionate about that extra $2, because that extra $2 may not make a difference in a downtown or in a La Jolla, but it'll make a big difference in Kensington.
So have you asked the mayor to veto the proposal? So just some background, she did get 5 votes for this, but she didn't get the 6th vote that would override a mayoral veto, which would seem to give the mayor and allies like you a chance to keep the negotiations going with a veto like that, especially with the support of Vivian Moreno, the city council woman from South Bay. And so I think the question now is, we're all waiting to see if the mayor does it. He has a few weeks. It seems like to think about that. Have you asked him to? Do you expect him to? And is that the only thing you can do to open up a negotiation?
Well, the negotiations are entirely up to the council president. We're absolutely ready. I'm really hopeful that we can continue this conversation, because I think, like I said, I don't think we're far off. And there's nothing to say we can't reopen it in 2 years' time or something like that. And so again, maybe that's Pollyanna, but I'm really hopeful we won't have to revisit the veto conversation, and instead can keep talking and make sure that we're explaining why we're coming at this maybe better. Maybe we haven't made a strong case to her, and that isn't something I would ask for the opportunity to try again, but it is ultimately going to be her decision.
So you haven't asked him to veto it?
We have asked him to keep that option available.
Okay.
We've acknowledged the presence of the nuclear button, but we have not asked anybody to put their thumb on it.
Again, we're asking for the mayor's help in getting everybody back to the table for negotiations. That is the first and biggest priority.
Let me take a step back. So some of the members of your coalition, Matt Adams at the BIA and others, have made have done a good job demonstrating that housing production is quite bad this year. First 6 months of this year, and that's down from a level that no one was exactly excited about.
Yeah.
But we're down,
right?
What, like 42% this year, right?
I think it was 48. I mean, for all the times I
to better
spend
county or city, right up. But
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, between 40 and 50%.
It's definitely bad.
Right. Here is what I don't understand. If anything, it seems to me that this year the regulatory environment has improved. Now, maybe it hasn't improved much. Maybe it's only improved at the margins. But it seems like the mayor has spent a lot of time touting the steps he's taken to improve the regulatory environment for housing. What are we to take from a 40% reduction in home building at a time when people were twisting the knobs, if anywhere, in the right direction, not the wrong direction, right? Is this the beginning of a downturn in the building cycle? Are we at the start of, is this a leading indicator of a recession? Why would things fall so dramatically at a time when things were not dramatically, fee levels were not dramatically increased this year, right? CEQA's requirements were not dramatically increased this year.
Yeah.
California's land costs were not dramatically increased this year.
Right.
What happened between 2018 and 2019 to cause a 42 to 48% reduction in housing development?
Well, let's remember that 2018 was still a pretty crappy year, right?
Absolutely.
For the past 10
Absolutely.
years, it's been pretty ooh,
really
we
bad.
should do something about that.
Yeah.
And now it's just crisis point, so everyone's
So
freaking
you
out.
got to
right?
go back to before the recession to have a good year.
Yeah, yeah. And so we know a couple things. The workforce never bounced back in construction industry. The prices of building everything have just continued to go up.
Mm-hmm.
Trump's tariffs did not do anyone any favors. And it's finally, as I understand it from people who do math for a living and are aggressively smarter than I am, as I understand it, the cost of building all of those things, the cost of getting there has finally topped out so high that you're not going to be able to get the rents to make that work. So now you're just seeing more people pull back because development is fundamentally a risk too. You know, you're taking a gamble with a lot of money that is not yours with the intention of being able to turn that profit to make that money back and continue doing your development thing, right? So that is something to just keep in mind. Developers don't pop out of the ground and just go, I'm going to plant some crap here and we're going to have some houses. Like it's a much longer process. And to that point though.
And people who invest in housing could invest in other markets if they'd like to.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, I hear from developers pretty frequently, like, so to your point about how we're turning the knobs in the right direction. We are. And so much credit should be given to the people who get down into the weeds and turn policy knobs to make it better or make it easier to build housing that we desperately need as a city. However, those policies take a while to hit, to start to work. Relaxing some of the requirements around parking was phenomenal, and it had a multi-pronged benefit in that we are trying to get people out of their cars. But these are things that are going to take the market a little while to wise up to. So most lenders are going to look at that and say, why aren't you parking this development? Like, I'm not going to give you, nobody's going to want to live there. Mm-hmm. So it's not the developer making those decisions. It's the financial backers that they have to go sell to get the money to build the thing. So that is issue one. Two, entitlements still take 4 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. So some of the projects that will take advantage of these new policies are still just a sparkle in someone's eye. Mm-hmm. And then I think finally we have seen significant benefits from things like the density bonus, which has been around long enough to have been utilized. And now we're wising up to the fact that we can even build off that success. So we are seeing progress, but ultimately, I think it is a function of where the market is right now. And I keep hearing we're going to have a recession, but I'm definitely not the authority on any of that. Sure, you got to ask Carafin for that.
Yeah. So your point is like there was a something was holding the market back already, and it's not that it just suddenly kicked in. It's been just getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. Working for the Chamber of Commerce, the first thing I hear when businesses are looking to come to San Diego is, where are my employees going to live? Like, it's an excellent question.
Yeah, you bring out your Temecula brochures.
No, that would probably be a terrible partnership for us to pursue. So I don't think that's happening.
Well, we got to probably close there. Thank you, Stefanie Benvenuto. She's a kind of smart person in some situations. She's also the Director of Public Affairs at the Chamber of Commerce and a member of the Housing Commission. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Voice of San Diego podcast. It's the most popular podcast and political affairs podcast recorded in downtown San Diego, especially this part of downtown, which is south of Little Italy and, kind of west of City Hall.
Core
Columbia. Qualifiers are important.
Columbia. If you've made it to the credits of this podcast, then you are a big fan of the Voice of San Diego. And so our morning report.
You decided you were going to finish doing these dishes before you turned off the podcast.
Yeah. I'm a good podcast dishes doer. It's the best. It's really a great time to listen to podcasts. So if you've made it through all this, our morning report is for you. You are really the type of person who would like that. The politics report too, and what we learned this week. You can subscribe to the morning report for free at voiceofsandiego.org/morning. I am Scott Lewis, editor-in-chief. Andrew Keats is assistant editor. Sarah Libby's managing editor. And this show is produced by Nate John, Adriana Heldes, and Megan Wood, all of whom got to go to the baseball game. Sarah did not. Thank you.